Tony! How's it going? Yeah.
He's wondering who it is.
How was the rain?
Bad. It was bad.
You unclogged a drain?
Yeah, in the corner right there. See that debris on the corner? That was all clogging it, and the whole drain was just a bay. As soon as I got it out, it went like a toilet. You know, it sucked all that water down in there. So now it's okay.
All right. So we're gonna go to the Union Tribune right now.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
How was your weekend?
That'd be Saturday, Sunday, and today's Monday. Surviving, just basically surviving. We were our cards are both out of food and we're out of money, so we had to try to get some food on the streets and stuff, and we did. We got some food on the streets. Yeah.
That's why you left your tent up?
Yes, yeah, Ginger's in it, just kind of trying to dry things out with a stove we have, and then later we'll maybe go to the laundromat, take everything with us.
Yeah.
And then get it all drenched another night, and then do it again tomorrow. That's okay.
Keeps you busy.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's like a job in itself, right?
It is. It is. Survival is. It's a day-long thing. I mean, it is. Mural. It's my favorite mural.
Oh, America's Finest City. That's.
Here we are at the Union Tribune. Hi, I'm Tony.
Hi,
Nice
Tony.
to meet you.
Dan McSwain.
Dan, I've heard you've done some writing on the homeless issue, and how big of a problem is it in San Diego?
It is huge, but in my view, it's manageable and solvable. What I've been focused on in my reporting investigation, and as a columnist at the San Diego Union Tribune, is what has worked in other places, and why is it rapidly getting worse here? I was just astonished when I looked at the data. And I've been looking almost exclusively at the federal data that HUD compiles for every city.
Yeah.
And I'm a business columnist and a numbers guy.
Oh, okay.
So I wanted to go back and look at the trends. No count is going to be perfect. The homeless are a really hard population to count.
Yeah.
So they do these annual point-in-time counts that I'm sure you're aware of.
Yeah, I did one.
Right, yeah. And there was just one at the end of January.
Yeah, yeah.
If you look at the categories that have been reasonably consistent since 2007, so that's 10 years, 2007 to 2016, San Diego's population of people that are living outdoors has gone up 58%, up to around 4,700 people almost. And that's living outside. They also count people in shelters, people who have hotel vouchers. My focus has been on the very neediest group, which I believe to be the chronically homeless people. There's about 1,100, 1,200 of those in San Diego County. Those numbers are up dramatically. The numbers of people who have been dying on the street is up dramatically. It's more than doubled in the last 2 years. 117 homeless people died on San Diego's streets and canyons in 2016. And this is alarming growth. And you know, when you talk to people, they say, well, there's always been homeless people. It's hopeless. It's never going to be solved. Yeah. And so I started looking at the data, and it turns out that places like Houston, Salt Lake City, they've made dramatic improvement over the 10 years that I've been studying. Yeah. So while San Diego has been getting much, much worse, these folks have been able to get much, much better. So that's been really the focus of my investigation. Wow. In Salt Lake, they focused on, I've talked to the folks that got that off the ground, and they've got their numbers so low, they're in the 100 range, and they know everybody by name. Yeah. It's Utah, it's Salt Lake City, it's culturally different than the West Coast probably. Yeah. And I thought I was going to see a bunch of, tough love, where, okay, we've identified some housing, if you don't get off the street, we're going to arrest you. And to my astonishment, there's none of that. What they do is constant outreach. They constantly contact these folks, the chronically homeless who have been out there. And just to back up a second, the federal definition of chronic homeless is somebody who's been continuously homeless for a year or more, or they've been homeless for major periods in 3 out of the last 4 years, and they're disabled, usually mentally, but also physically. So you've got people who are disabled, you've got people who have been out there for a long time, and they're dying, they're suffering and dying. And along with the veteran category, the governor of Utah back in 2004 said, I want a 10-year plan to get all the chronically homeless and all the veteran homeless into housing. That got up and running in earnest in about 2006, and now 11, 12 years later, they've gotten it down to where they know everybody who's in that population. They contact them over and over again, and eventually those people say, sure, I would rather live inside than outside. And the people who say they would rather stay outside, in Salt Lake City in particular, that's where most of them are, how do you talk them into getting into housing? What the experts there have told me is, well, we keep checking on them, and usually there's an emergency of some kind. They need medical help or something happens, and then we let them know that there's a unit with no strings attached, ready for them, and they generally come inside.
Do you have personal experience with homelessness? Or?
I don't like to overstate my personal experience with homelessness. I didn't have a permanent place to call home for about 4 years in the early 90s. My home was either a jail or a rehab or a halfway house of some kind. And I did spend intervals of several weeks at a time. This was in a city back east, living in abandoned buildings. So I was briefly a street homeless.
Enough time, though.
Yeah, it was enough time to make me understand some of the challenges. In my case, it was mental illness. It was addiction. You know, I was a financially successful person in my 20s. I had my own business, or a business with a partner, but I've got a family history of alcoholism after not drinking, you know, hardly at all through most of my 20s. I became successful, and I decided it was time to relax a little bit. And within a couple of years, I had sold my half of the business. I was drinking and taking other serious drugs full time and bouncing off the bottom hard for just right about 4 years. And then I recovered, and I haven't had a drink in almost 20 years now.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. I tell people it was very resource intensive. I had a police sergeant named Green who chased me around this city and made it his business to get me to change my behavior. The courts were involved. I was sent to a lockdown treatment facility. I spent 7.5 months looking at barbed wire, promising myself I was going to change my life when I got out. And 3 days later, I was broke in a hotel room, right back where I started. I needed sober living. I needed a lot of outside help. There was a retired Episcopal priest that ran this recovery house that I was in, and I went through there 3 times. I kept thinking I was going to be better, and I would leave that environment and try to do things on my own and get a good job, and then boom, I'd be right back. The last time I ended up with absolutely nothing to my name, living on his couch, taking handouts from this old priest, and I ended up staying there 13 months, and since then my mental illness has been in remission. I also try to tell people that my story may be important for people who don't have those problems to understand, but don't pay too much attention to it, because I know lots of people who just aren't going to get better. They say that when somebody's sitting in jail, they're costing society $30,000 plus a year. And you know, now I've had years where I paid that much in taxes almost. So I've gone from a burden to society and somebody that you didn't want to pass on the street to somebody contributing to society. And that's great. That's great news. And a lot of people can get better if they have a whole lot of help, like I did. But I worry more about the people who just aren't going to get better. And who are going to die out there and cause trouble, some of them. And so there are people with more organic, more mental illness, like schizophrenia, various major depression, psychosis, and I see them on the streets of San Diego all the time. Like there's a woman, and you know, I walk past her every day on my way to work, and she literally, like my old granny, my old Kentucky grandma used to say, that kid ain't got sense enough to get out of the rain, right? Well, she's sitting in the rain right now. And I try to give her my umbrella. She doesn't want my umbrella. And there's a place where she can get out of the rain a block away. But so this woman needs a lot of help. And right now, we're not helping her.
That's so sad, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's an article you wrote on the front page of the Union Tribune about diverting sources of money we already have coming in toward the homeless issue. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I'd love to. I've been dealing with homeless people and people with severe problems for 25 years. And my big project was myself for the first 5 years or so. But since then, I've tried to stay engaged. But professionally, as a journalist, I got heavily involved just this summer. I tried to come very fresh and very open-minded, and like everybody else, tried to figure out what's going on. Why is it getting worse so quickly in San Diego compared to some other places? And so I think it's important to look at the causes and what's different about San Diego. One of them is we've had, we had a big recession, and where, by the way, the chronic severe homelessness didn't actually get dramatically worse. It's gotten dramatically worse in just the last few years, while we've had a fairly strong economy, and in particular, another real estate boom, with a lot of luxury apartments being built, lots of condominiums being built, especially downtown. So my colleague, James DeHaven, an investigative reporter here, looked at all of the data for San Diego's affordable housing programs, and he made a very important discovery. Over the last 6 years, we have had 10,000 units of low-cost housing disappear from the landscape here. And most of those, or a lot of them, I can't say most because I'm not as familiar with the data as he is on the housing units, but the single-room occupancy, the SROs, those used to be a wonderful way to get off the street. Even if it was 2 or 3 people sharing a room, these are very low-cost rooms. They generally didn't have kitchen facilities. And these have been displaced by market rate luxury units. Some of them have been turned into boutique hotels. Some have been torn down and turned into high-rise condominiums. And we've lost 10,000 of them in 6 years. Now, that's more than the city's housing commission has built since 1979. We have the private sector that's eliminating these units, and some of them were subsidized units from back in the 70s that fell off of the government programs, and now the owners can redevelop them. So we've had those market forces that are pushing people out, and at the same time, we have the city woefully failing to keep up with its initiatives to build or help the private sector build more affordable units. And when I look at the affordable units, and this is the data I'm more personally familiar with, the city's housing commission has built well over 8,000 units in the last 11, 12 years. But only 615 of those have been dedicated to homeless people. So the vast majority of what we are building is not going to the people who are suffering the most and who have the most severe problems. Those are going to the working poor, the low-income families. We have hundreds of millions of dollars, literally, pouring into the system every year, and it's being sprinkled very broadly over dozens of agencies and at least 45 different programs, and we're not helping the people who need it the most. And the mayor of Houston had a wonderful phrase for this. She said, "We're putting a thin layer of peanut butter on everybody's sandwich."
I've heard that before.
And nobody's getting fed.
Isn't that the truth?
So in the cities that have been the most effective, they have been able to, first of all, identify where all the money is, and then refocus it on the greatest need. Salt Lake and Houston are prominent examples. And so what I found is that we have almost $400 million a year being spent on homelessness and homelessness prevention. And there's no one agency or one person in charge of all that money. I can't find any government agency, let alone any person, who knows how much where it's all being spent. And that's just the tax money. There's also a whole bunch of private and nonprofit money out there. For example, St. Vincent de Paul, I believe only 30% of their total funding comes from the public sector, from taxpayers. The rest of it's private. So we've got a whole bunch of private money out there. We've got a whole bunch of public money, and a lot of good people doing a lot of good work, but they're all working in parallel. They're not talking to each other. There's not a good system to communicate. Here's the resources available, and this is precisely what they found in Salt Lake City in particular. And there, the governor got involved. He drafted basically a retired business guy named Gordon Walker, and a retired Church of Latter-day Saints executive named Lloyd Pendleton. And they spent a couple years just talking to people saying what is everybody doing, and how much money do we have? And they've got specific examples. The way I like to illustrate it, and these are not precise numbers, but let's say we had somebody who really wanted to coordinate things in San Diego, and they found out, well, gosh, we've got all these churches and all these people delivering meals. Let's say we've got 30 agencies, 30 churches doing Meals on Wheels. Okay, how many people are doing property management? How many people are identifying apartments that might be able to house some people? And the answer comes back, well, we don't have anybody doing property management, and we got 30 people doing Meals on Wheels. One of the questions they've asked in other cities is, okay, well, could we retrain all of your social workers to come over here and do this? And let's figure out who's the best at doing meals and let them do more of it. So that sort of basic management practice is that basic leadership is what I see as a real problem here. Thank goodness the mayor has become aware of this, and he hired a senior advisor for homelessness named Stacy Spector. She's been in mostly listen and learn mode. She's now started, and I think she came aboard in October maybe. Just last month and early this month, she started talking about some initiatives through the 211 system. 211's amazing. They've got a really good outfit down there, but they don't have the data. They don't know how many beds are available. So what Stacy Spector's trying to do is get anybody who deals with homelessness in the entire county, starting with the city, but eventually the entire region, to work together and say, on any given night, here's what we have available. And this one is for veterans, that one is for families with kids, this one is for foster youths who've aged out of the system and now they're homeless because they turned 18, for example. Here's a chronic homeless person with type 2 diabetes that needs medication, and you'll be able to call 211 and very easily figure out, because I've watched these people from the homeless outreach team, and I've seen them on their cell phones saying, hey, here's somebody who wants a bed. Do you have a bed? No. Okay. And they'll say, try somebody else. It's very inefficient. But the fundamental problem, and the mayor's team is just scratching the surface. And in my view, their proposals are far too modest. They are talking about putting some beds back that were taken away just 2 years ago, and not even all of them. I think they need to do far more. I'm an optimist. I think they'll get there eventually. It did take several years in these other cities that succeeded. So I'm not criticizing what they're doing at all. I'd like to see them go faster. I'd like to see the mayor declare an emergency. But I do believe that there is a ton of money out there. It's just not well managed and well coordinated.
What do you think about a bond measure? Would that be something that we could do here in San Diego, maybe countywide, or would we need that?
We probably do need more money, but I don't know that. Because I've been working on this close to full time since July, and I can't find all the money. There's money sitting in various agencies. There's city and county and state agencies that have money coming in. There's a state bond issue, and there's money available there. And one of the things that really concerns me is that the agencies that are already in charge of producing housing for the homeless, for example, if you look at their financial information over the last several years, they've had cash balances that are piling up. So we have a doubling in the number of people who are dying on our streets, and these folks are having trouble spending the money they've got. So there's something fundamentally wrong with the system. And I think that needs to be addressed first. Now, could we use more money? Absolutely. My fear is that bond issues are very hard to pass politically in San Diego. Politicians have tried over and over and over again and failed. And if everybody got behind a bond issue for 2018, my concern is that everybody would go to sleep until 2018 to see whether we're going to get that money. In a perfect world, our leadership would realize that this is a crisis, mobilize the best and brightest people inside and outside of city government to figure out what's going on today and why we can't build any units, or not enough units, and that why the units that we do manage to build are so expensive. There is an affordable housing project down in Barrio Logan that cost $500,000 plus per unit. Now this is what a luxury 3-bedroom condo costs.
Yeah.
So why are we building kitchenettes and 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms for, now that's an extreme example. A more typical cost is $350,000.
Yeah, I've heard that. Yeah.
But then I start to look at, I'm a business guy,
Yeah.
and I start to look at those numbers, and I see tens of thousands of dollars per unit in city development impact fees. Okay, why is the city charging the poor people of San Diego an impact fee like they do a luxury housing unit?
Yeah, exactly.
So why aren't those fees being waived?
It should be.
3 Fridays ago, I sat at a meeting of the Housing Commission all morning, and they were talking about 4 projects that are coming down the pike.
Yeah.
And it was great news. They're really starting to gear up at the Housing Commission. They've got a lot more units in production. One of the projects is a new project, and I believe it's going to be 44 units of homeless housing. It's got clauses where they can only use union labor that they say will increase the cost by 20%. I understand that when public funds are being used, that the state of California pretty much requires those to be union jobs. But if this is an emergency and we care about poor people, why can't the labor unions come together and agree to work for a lower cost for that project?
Yeah.
So why aren't they chipping in, for example? And I'm not picking on the unions.
Yeah, no.
But then I look somewhere else in that project, and for 44 units, they have 44 parking spaces. Now, why do homeless people need 44 parking spaces?
Yeah.
Parking spaces are a very real cost.
Yeah.
For all that parking, and it's next to transit. If we're going to address climate change and we're going to do transit-friendly, affordable housing, why are we building parking spaces instead of putting units on that land?
Yeah.
We see absurd outcomes like this all over the place. We're not waiving fees.
Yeah.
We're picking the highest cost labor requirements and not asking everybody to pitch in.
Yeah.
We are allowing development fees that are as high as they are elsewhere in the housing economy. And finally, the units that we do build with public dollars and private dollars and federal tax credits, most of those aren't going to the homeless. They're going to people who make 30 to 60% of median income. Now, those folks need help, but they don't need as much help as the woman who's sitting out in the rain this morning.
Yeah.
Okay, so the people elsewhere in this country that have really showed the way to how to manage homelessness, how to reduce those numbers, they have focused very relentlessly on the people who need the help the most, and how do we do it in the most efficient way. And the other fear I have is that if we were successful in bringing a bunch of money in through a bond issue, that money would come in one door, and that would take the pressure off of what we're doing over here, elsewhere in the budget. It's just like a balloon. You squeeze one side of the balloon and the other side gets bigger. Are we going to have a bond issue that says this will only supplement what we're spending already, instead of just allow the city to spend the money that we're spending now and use this new income stream to spend less over here?
It's almost like you have to get everybody involved at a table like this and say, are we going to do this or not?
Right.
And if we're going to do it, we're not going to accept no for an answer. We're all going to have to compromise. We're going to have our leaders have to be dedicated and excited and determined to do what they want to do, like the mayor of Houston. She said, I risked myself. I risked being unpopular, but I did it because, why? Because it was the right thing to do.
Yeah, and she showed results, and she made progress, and so now she's gone, and they're continuing with that program. In Utah, they went through 3 different governors, maybe 4. I think they're on their 4th governor since they decided to try to end the homelessness. And they've basically got 0 homeless veterans now, and their chronic numbers are down, 80, 100 at the most. So these are people who have made 70-something% declines in their neediest population. And I compare it to a battlefield, where the medical term triage. You have somebody with a migraine headache, you have somebody with a broken leg, but they're not going to die. You have somebody else over here who may just die if you don't look at them first. Those are the people you spend your resources on first.
Exactly.
When you get them stabilized and airlifted to the hospital, then you go set the broken leg.
Yeah,
Then you
makes
go
sense.
treat the migraine headache. And that's what we're not doing in San Diego.
Yeah, you're right.
We've got a huge leadership problem here. And I don't want to blame personalities because it's part of a culture.
Yeah.
There's a culture here that these people are, they're dirty, they're deranged. Some people think they're lazy.
Yeah.
There's a lot of judgment around the homeless.
Yeah.
And in the places where it's worked, there's also been an ingredient of compassion.
Yeah.
They say these are our brothers and sisters who need help, and we're going to get them help first. So I think refocusing our effort on the neediest people first,
Yeah.
get those numbers down dramatically, and then start working higher up the need chain, the hierarchy of need,
Yeah.
is very essential. And going back to the political culture here, leaders come and go, politicians come and go. In government, we tend to award efforts.
Yeah.
If a politician cuts a ribbon and says, I've increased funding 10%, hooray for me, I get reelected.
Yeah.
And we need a results-based approach,
Yeah.
a business-based approach, which is show me the results, show me the numbers going down.
Yeah.
Don't show me how you've expanded spending and launched a new program
Yeah.
or hired 42 new social workers or psychologists. Show me if the numbers are going down.
Exactly.
And the sort of relentless experimentation that some of the great leaders in our history have, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt.
Yeah.
He just kept trying stuff until the numbers started working.
Yeah.
A lot of it failed, some of it succeeded. So how do you create a political culture, a relentless focus on results? Well, I have argued that the business community needs to get involved.
Yeah.
We've got very wealthy people with their names on university buildings and their names on hospitals in this town. Where are they on the homeless issue?
Yeah.
Where are the hotel owners? Where are the people who have long-term leases on public land
Yeah.
in this city who have for generations earned vast amounts of wealth, really?
Yeah.
Where are the tech entrepreneurs in this town? One of the biggest problems with homeless people as a class is they don't have a lobby.
Yeah.
Okay? They've got nobody going to the fundraising dinners
Yeah.
for the people who get elected, for the leaders that we do select.
Yeah.
So unless the business community and the faith community and the nonprofit service community, all these people have to come together and have long-term advocacy for the homeless.
Yeah.
Or it's all just going to fall apart. We could get one enlightened great leader, we could get a bunch of effort,
Yeah.
and then 10 years from now we're going to be right back where we are today.
I think the mood is changing, though. I think people, just from me being on the street and people hand out food and all that, but it's changing. People are coming to me more and more and saying, what can I do? What can I do to help you? You know, one lady opened her purse like this and says, take what you need. That you can give me $10. It's not going to solve the problem. It'll help me today, but you know, and that's what this, I think, documentary is about, is what they can do. You know, write their congressmen, write their city representatives, go to the rallies. There's things that we can do, but I think the momentum is moving toward helping the homeless.
Well,
issue.
I hope you're right.
Yeah.
I share your optimism.
Yeah.
I like to remind people that the hardest thing to do in San Diego County is to build a bunch of apartments.
Yeah.
Land use is under government control.
Yeah.
We're not going to get homeless people off the street and
Yeah.
into housing unless we get them some units.
Yeah.
And that is really hard in Southern California. We've got a lot of fees, we've got a lot of restrictions. You try to do anything in this town and all the neighbors come together and say, no, we don't want it.
Yeah.
And that's for luxury housing. You'd go into a community and say, we want to build 50 units of permanent supportive housing,
Yeah.
and we're going to put a whole bunch of schizophrenics on medication, okay?
Yeah.
Or we're going to put, like St. Paul, Minnesota.
Yeah.
They have a hospice for chronic alcoholics,
Yeah.
people who, unlike me, never recover. They've been to rehabs,
Yeah.
they've been to AA, they've been down every road you can possibly go, and they are dying of alcoholism.
Yeah.
Well, Catholic Charities, with money from the county that surrounds St. Paul, Minnesota, they've set up a place with a bunch of modest 400 square foot apartments, and people go there and it's hospice. They're dying of liver failure, they're dying of diabetes, they're dying of chronic alcoholism, but they're not going to die on a park bench in front of everybody, and they're not going to die alone. come into a neighborhood and say, we're going to have a facility and it's going to be well maintained.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a blight. I mean, what we're doing now is a blight. It's tragic and it's also disruptive. It's not right. But to be able to confront neighbors and to be able to educate neighbors and say, yes, these are our brothers and sisters, we need to bring them into your community, that is a tall order. And that requires political clout, it requires money, and it requires a great deal of will. And so I can rant and rave about the failures of political leadership, but you know what? The business community has to be involved. And I'm not even criticizing the homeless service community, the people like Father Joe's or Alpha Project or San Diego Rescue Mission. These folks can't stick their heads out. They can't go down to city council and say, I'm going to sit here and not eat for 30 days like Mitch Snyder used to do, right? But if they do, they're going to get their funding cut. They're going to be retaliated against. San Diego Rescue doesn't take a nickel of public funding, but they've had problems with their permits. They've had problems with the neighbors not wanting them around. They've been chased out of downtown and up into Bankers Hill or wherever they landed, and they had problems expanding. So we need somebody who's going to advocate year in and year out for the homeless and not go away. I'm getting a sense, like you, that the culture is changing. And I think behind the scenes there are some prominent business people, prominent philanthropists who are coming together and trying to form some organizations that will advocate in San Diego for the homeless on a lasting basis. And right now it's just at the talk stage, so I can't talk about it really. I think that's what we need for a lasting. Whenever a land use decision comes before city government all over the county, whether it's Escondido, whether it's San Diego, you've got powerful people on both sides trying to get that done. You've got the developer, you've got the labor unions, the building trades, they want to get something done. You've got the neighbors, they don't want to get something done. You need somebody who's at the table for the homeless.
That's true.
On every step of the way. And until that happens, we could spend some money, we could build some facilities, but it's not going to. I'll just point to the 10,000 units that have gone away in the last 6 years. I mean, that violates city ordinance. There's a 30-something-year-old city ordinance in San Diego that says before an affordable housing unit can fall off the rolls, the city must provide one to go onto the rolls. Well, that hasn't happened. We've had a net loss of 10,000 units. So the homeless people need clout. And they got no money, and a lot of them don't vote. So somebody needs to stand up for the homeless. Or nothing's going to change.
Finest city.
Right. Right. We want to act like the finest city. As long as claimed, as well as claimed to be.
We have an opportunity to do
And
that.
it is an opportunity. It's not hopeless. Before I came back into journalism after my life meltdown, I worked in technology-based businesses and a couple of turnaround situations. And for me, there was nothing better than walking into a place that needed a lot of help, because then you could really make an impact. You could really fix some things. And what's exciting about the horrible conditions that we've created here in San Diego is that they're fixable, they're solvable. And if a political leader wants to step forward, trust me, this is not a hopeless cause. This is not a lose-lose politically. Somebody can step forward and be the person who solved homelessness in San Diego County.
It can happen.
And if you're a philanthropist, you can be the person who made a difference in hundreds and hundreds and even thousands of lives. And the numbers are manageable. If you look at the chronic homelessness population in San Diego County, the entire county, it's about 1,200 people. We can get 1,200 people into housing. If you look at the number of unsheltered people at any given time, that number is a little over 4,000. Okay? In Houston, it was 5,000 in some, and they got it down into the 1,700 range in just about 6 or 7 years. So we can make those numbers, and let's say it's a horrible failure. I mean, in a business context, if you tried to do something and you only got halfway there, everybody would say you failed. You only got 50% of your goal. Well, if we got only half of the people we wanted to off the streets, that's 2,200 people you've helped. Or if you look at the chronic population, that's 700 people, 600 people that you've helped.
Yeah.
So the numbers are manageable, and it's absolutely doable. You can't solve poverty, probably. You can't get everybody who wants a subsidized apartment into a subsidized apartment, probably. But you can take all of the veterans and get them into housing in San Diego. My research has led me to a couple of basic conclusions. Number one, the problem is rapidly getting worse in San Diego. We have a crisis, we have an emergency, any word that you want to use. We have a very, very serious problem in San Diego. So that's item number one. And we have lots of good people who are doing lots of good work right now. They just need some coordination. They need a little bit more resources, certainly. But we just need some focus, is what I think. I think it's manageable. I think it's solvable.
Yeah.
And some other major cities have shown us how to do this. We spent a lot of time focusing on what's wrong with the homeless. I think it's time in San Diego to focus on what's wrong with San Diego. What's wrong with us? What are we doing that's wrong? I mean, the first step of solving a problem is to admit you have a problem and take an honest look at why we're failing.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, there is movement. You've helped make me more optimistic, but I agree with you. I think people are concerned now. I think the leadership is starting to coalesce, and I think it needs a big push, particularly from the business community. I think we do need to find a charismatic leader who can stick with this thing over the long haul.
Yeah, that's true.
In Utah, they drafted 2 retired business executives, or a church executive and a business executive. Those 2 men gave 10 years of their professional lives to this.
Wow.
They worked on this for 10 years. And that's what it's going to take here. So if there's a general or an admiral or a retired corporate executive in San Diego, stop being so selfish, and time to give back to your community. It's time to step up and let the mayor put you to work.
Yeah, that's true. It's been wonderful talking with you. You brought up a lot of valid points. Thank you
Man,
so
this
much.
has been a pleasure.
Okay,
Thank you.
My pleasure. I like that he talked about that one woman who was didn't have enough sense to get out of the rain, and how we should help her, and we should. Very informative, and I think he afforded us a different angle to look at things. Brought up some points about having to find what's wrong with the system we have now, because obviously something is wrong. I mean, the homeless numbers are increasing. Also, you talked about the beds that were taken away. You know, that we need to put those beds back. We've torn down SROs that could have been converted. Okay. Yeah. Hey, how you doing? All right.
See a lot of homelessness on the streets?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's especially sad when it's Thanksgiving, December, and especially as a Lyft driver, I'm driving people in fancy clothes to fancy parties.
Anywhere around here would be good. That's actually my tent over there, the yellow one. So. Yeah. My girlfriend drenched. Right. Okay, bye-bye. Thanks.